Thank you so much, and thank you to Beacon for Rare Diseases for the very kind invitation to speak today. And really nice to see some familiar faces. Put your hand up if you already know me. Hello, friends. And if I don't already know you, it's lovely to meet you. So I am a severe alopecia patient advocate. I'm a medical professional, ex-NHS. I used to work on the front line in emergency and acute medicine. And I left to join industry to drive a more patient-focused R&D landscape and sort of insert myself in the advocate space from an internal perspective to drive change. I was trained at the University of Glasgow, and I remember being trained, and it was ingrained in all of us, that when you engage with patients, you look at them holistically and you are your patient's biggest advocate. And I continue to hold that dear to me today. And I'm going to tell you exactly how that was the complete opposite of my experience as a patient in the NHS. So I was aged 8 when I started to lose my hair. And if you know anything about alopecia, it's actually quite a rare autoimmune condition. You may or may not have a progressive pattern of hair loss. The uncertainty is ultimately the biggest concern for most people. You don't know, is it going to get worse, or is it going to grow back, or when? So you're constantly living in this sort of state of awareness about your loss of identity and who you are. Certainly from my own experience, I pretty much didn't really want to go to school. The only way that I would go to school when I was aged 8 was because my parents went in and asked for a change of school uniform for me to wear a hat so that I could go to school, just didn't want people looking at me. So pretty big change in quality of life just from small patches of hair loss. And the second instance, after I had some treatment, second instance happened when I was 14. And again, sort of at that stage in your life, quite a pivotal age, being a teenager, with your sense of identity, your sense of femininity, socializing, not wanting to go to school again. And somehow I made it into university, despite not really wanting to go to school. At my second year of university, when I was 19 years old, I lost about 50% of my hair, developed agoraphobia, and I didn't want to leave the house, and I almost didn't graduate. And at that point, that's when I added in some counselling into the picture, just to be able to keep going. And in 2018, I lost my dad suddenly, unexpectedly. He was my hero. And he was also a big patient advocate for his community that he worked with. And so I learned from the best, but ultimately losing my biggest supporter in life probably led, we don't actually know this for sure, probably led to the rapid hair loss that transpired in 2019, right before the COVID-19 pandemic began. I was very fortunate to have access and be able to pay for a start to have this repurposed hair, human hair, which is not mine. And that was my saving grace, because I was doing a person-centered, facing job, and I wanted to be able to continue to do that. And there's a lot of civil sort of prescription of ideas about what women should look like, and a lot of pressure. So I felt as though the hair was really the only way I could continue with my life, full stop. I couldn't work. I was absolutely traumatized, and I didn't really feel like life was worth living. And the only thing that really kept me going was that I've got a role. I'm an auntie. I'm Auntie Lorna. And if it wasn't for my niece and my nephew, I probably wouldn't have continued in life at this point. I didn't have access to any treatments. The GP discharged me home, told me there was nothing they could do for me. And I had to keep going back to primary care to fight for my access to secondary care dermatology specialist services. So in the process of all of these things, the onus was really on me to drive access to repurposed medicines. The health service was not instantly providing for me. The medicines that I received were topical steroids initially when I was 8, injectable steroids when I was 14, which were pretty painful, as you can imagine, having injections into your scalp, your bald scalp. And then, as I said, I introduced counselling when I was at university, which was fortunately free. And the repurposed medicines that I finally got access to in 2021 were minoxidil, which was originally a hypertension drug, and fexofenadine. And if I hadn't got access to those repurposed medicines, at that point in my life, I was 100%, my life was over. It was not worth living. I had lived for approximately 4 or 5 years with severe hair loss and no access to specialist care and no access to evidence-based medicine. I had seen 2 dermatologists who refused to give me an unlicensed medicine and compassionate use. And like the patient advocate that was speaking this morning, I went in with the JAK inhibitor research and waved it in the clinic and was promptly marched out of the clinic. You know, this crazy lady coming in with all these ideas, who does she think she is? And that's actually been the attitude for 2 specialist dermatology services in the north of England. So then I fought back again, and I went to see the national specialists in London. And that was 5 years without any access to a specialist. When I finally got to see him, he gave me 45 minutes of his time, which if you've ever experienced the NHS is unheard of. He told me about all of his amazing research that he was doing, all of the times he had initiated these repurposed drugs in his patients. And if I had not found that one needle in a haystack doctor myself, I wouldn't still be here today. So how did I finally get access to JAK inhibitors? So there's been obviously a regulatory and reimbursement process going on in the background in the NHS that I've been acutely aware of and keeping track of and shouting loudly about, as you can imagine. And over time, our government and our health economists have been saying, oh, you know, well, there's not enough quality of life data within the alopecia, severe alopecia community. And that's because we don't have a patient registry that covers the whole nation. We have 3 clinical sites on the patient registry. So if you don't have the real world evidence for how many patients actually live with the condition, the likelihood of you getting access and reimbursement is quite slim. But eventually, the NICE group did actually approve the second JAK inhibitor in the UK, repurposed, and I was acutely aware of this in March. I was awaiting a clinic letter to say, you know, look, Lorna, come into the clinic and let's do your baseline bloods, etc. Nothing happened, absolute radio silence until the sort of mandatory period for the NHS to initiate the service had passed. I made a complaint to my local trust, the ICB in Yorkshire and Humber, and I basically said, look, you're breaching the NHS Confederation. I know my rights. And I'm empowered enough at this point because I've had access to a repurposed medicine to make this case. If I hadn't had that, I would not have had the ability to advocate for myself. So on the 1st of November last year, 2024, the drug was delivered by a home service care provider directly to my house. I sent a cheesy picture with the drug box to my dermatologist to show her, because sometimes when you work in the NHS, you've got no idea what's happening with your patients. And I thought that she would appreciate that she had also fought for me at that point in time to actually receive a treatment after 5 years without any evidence-based treatment. And actually, I was 40 years old before I had an evidence-based treatment for my rare condition. What's really important to me about advocacy is that even 1 or 2 or 3 or a handful of people being able to navigate to what they need and speaking about what you do to people in the community can make a huge difference to the quality of life to people. And what my dermatologist said to me was, Lauren, it's amazing. The people that come in after treatment, after even four months on ritlecitinib, I've regrown my eyebrows. I've got about 80% of my scalp hair. I can go back in the swimming pool, which is where I feel most like me. And my swimming cap actually sticks onto my scalp and doesn't pop off. And I can actually do the lanes of swimming that really makes me feel well, like I've got wellness. And these things make a huge difference. So even just a small change like regrowing your eyebrows and some scalp hair can really change a person's life. the person who creates my bespoke measured for me hair system actually listens to everything I've got to say to her, and she tells the rest of the community who she knows that I know this doctor, and she tells me you can go to Harrogate and you can ask to see this particular clinician who will prescribe this drug for you. And now 3 patients have been able to access ritlecitinib treatment, which I think is a massive achievement. I also work in industry, so I work as a medical affairs and patient engagement professional, and I just wanted to share a small case study about the impact that drugs repurposing can really make from the industry professional perspective. And because I've got lived experience of the battle and the fight to get access to a treatment, I could identify with the patient's family who came to me for help, and I had the will to when there is a will, there is a way. I'm the right person to be inside a pharma company to do that. There are many people who are very risk averse. They, will blame compliance and, oh, we can't deal directly with patients. But what I did do was I set up a clinical excellence network with clinicians in Italy. And eventually the patient from the UK who couldn't get a prescriber in the UK was able to access a medicine from a professor in Italy. I think this really demonstrates that both clinicians, both HCPs and industry are still quite low on the will to work and focus on repurposed medicines. Obviously, we know there's a commercial sort of imperative behind the pharma industry's perspective of repurposed medicines, but there's still a really big unmet need for patients to be able to find the right clinician who will prescribe a repurposed medicine. And how do we help patients to navigate to that right one needle in a haystack clinician who's going to be their biggest advocate? So just to finish up, I've written my patient experience article at the BMJ in case you ever want to have a wee look at it. And I just want to say thank you so much for listening, for your attention, but also for considering what it might be like for somebody to fight just to get access to some cheapest chips, minoxidil and fexofenadine. Thank you.